It is noon, so we're going to go ahead and get started because we have so much that we want to talk about on today's call. My name is Gina Warner. I'm the president of the National After School Association. So honored and excited to have this conversation with you all today with our special guest, Dr. Jamie Freeney. I will introduce her in a moment. There she is. Hi. I want to begin by thanking a number of our state affiliates who are partnering with us in today's event. We have the Texas Partnership for Out of School Time, TextPost, the Illinois After School Network, the New York Network for Youth Success, the Indiana After School Network, the Utah After School Network, the Minnesota School Age Care Alliance, and the North Dakota After School Network. Thank you all, those affiliates, for partnering with us on this. If you are looking to become more involved at your state level, please visit our website, naaweb.org. We have about 34, I think that's right, state affiliates around the country. Click on the map on our website and find out the state affiliate in your state and get involved. I think we all need the connection, all the connections we can find these days, and our state affiliates are doing such great work out in the field to support all of you, and then working with us at the national level. So please, if you're not already, become involved and engaged with your state affiliate. So I am so honored today to have Dr. Jamie Freeney joining us. Dr. Freeney is the director, the Center of School Behavioral Health at the Mental Health America of Greater Houston. She is a graduate of the University of Texas School of Public Health. She received her undergraduate degree from the University of Kentucky. And I just loved our preparation for this call, getting to know her, appreciate her warmth, her approachability, her knowledge, her expertise, and her willingness to share in this discussion with all of us. So Dr. Freeney, welcome.
Thank you so much, Gina, for such a warm welcome. I'm excited to be here. I'm honored to be speaking to this team of wonderful individuals who work on a daily basis to impact the lives of our youth. And so I am appreciative of the invitation, and just want to make sure that you all walk away having learned something new, and I will try to do my best to answer all of the great questions, but I'm looking forward to this conversation. And I also want to say thank you so much for holding the space for this conversation. It's not always a comfortable conversation, but it's definitely necessary. So thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. And thank you for mentioning the word comfortable, because I think when you and I were preparing, we both committed that we want this to be such a conversational approach to this topic. And I think I even use the words because I want people to be comfortable, but then I acknowledge this isn't always a comfortable topic, and we need to get a little bit uncomfortable about it, because that's what it's going to take to move this topic forward, to really make impact on this issue. And when I think about the after school field, I really think about this for us as an opportunity, but I also think about it as a responsibility. You know, when I look at our membership, the people joining us today, you know, I see people from all over the country. I see all races, I see all genders, and that's really what it's going to take for us to have an impact on this discussion. So that our role and responsibilities in communities, but more importantly, our role in the lives of young people, the impact that we have on the families that they're living in the communities. So it's important, and it's up to us, and we are very thankful to have experts like you guiding us in that. So I have some questions I'm going to ask Dr. Freeney, but hopefully again in a very conversational way. But we are we want to hear your questions too. And so my colleague Heidi Ham is on the call. For those of you who've done these calls with us before, I'll check in about halfway through with Heidi for some questions to bring from the audience. But let's just jump in. I mean, Dr. Freeney, why are these conversations important? Why do we need to have these conversations with young people?
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. And this country was built on race and racism, and it certainly still exists today. And so it's essential that we talk with children at an early age to be able to start to deconstruct and disrupt powerful and harmful narratives about race, about racism, about ethnicity, nationality. And it's also important because racism and discrimination affect the mental health and well-being of youth. We often hear about the effects on adults and how it's difficult to buy homes, difficult to get jobs, difficult to make equitable salaries, but we certainly don't want to dismiss the impact that these same systems, these same structures, the biases that lie within us have on the well-being of children and adolescents. And so we also know that exposure helps to reduce fear and violent acts. And so if we start talking early to our children about race and racism and what it means, then we can hopefully reduce the number of violent acts and reduce the fear that exists when we come across something that's new, when we see something that's different. And so we want to start to instill some level of recognition and appreciation for those that may look different or act different from us. And then also, it's super important because oftentimes parents or educators may be uncomfortable talking about it, and so they leave it to the children or youth to figure it out on their own. And this only perpetuates privilege and allows media and their own experiences to influence what they think and how they respond. And so it's really important that we start to have the conversation so that they have facts and that they can process and ask questions, and they can have their own, utilize their own experience and their own knowledge to make judgments.
So I want to, so much there, which we're going to unpack. I want to start with something that probably feels pretty basic. You mentioned having conversations with young children. So how young?
Yeah, research suggests that children as young as 5 are aware of and some are negatively impacted by stereotypes about their groups. They certainly start to ask questions. For example, if I can share my own personal experience, when I was younger, I guess I was probably around 11 or 12, and I was babysitting for a couple hours for a neighbor, and the family is white, and the little girl was asking me, I don't know, about something. For some reason, it came out that I had to go to the gas station with my parents or something like that. And I was telling them about that I was pumping gas for the first time and wasted gas on me. And her question was, "Oh, is that why your skin is brown?" And so, again, a very innocent question, but at the time, just taking that knowledge that she recognized that and that she put those two things together to ask that question lets us know that children, and she was maybe six at the time, that children are certainly aware. And so again, with interactions between children in preschool and in kindergarten, they certainly become aware of who's different and how people treat them and how they treat others. And so we do suggest that starting as early as 4 or 5, even younger than that, with just certain representations in books and dolls and things like that will certainly be helpful. And it's also important not to stop at just one conversation. This is an ongoing conversation that can take place naturally. It can occur at any time. It could be brief, or it could be a longer conversation where you sit down with the intention of talking about it.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that all speaks to your earlier comment about if we don't take these opportunities to address conversations like the one you shared, children are going to, and we know this, like we're child development professionals, children are going to create their own understanding of that, which is probably, not given their developmental levels, not appropriate, not accurate, and they're going to carry that with them, right? So how do you start? How do you explain race and racism to children? And I'm sure there are conditions that we can create to make that conversation more effective.
Absolutely. So I'll start with the conditions. It's very basic things, such as taking a non-punitive tone. So, having the ability to be calm and to not get too nervous or anxious or freak out when a child or a student raises a question about race, but also creating a safe space. So allowing any and all questions to take place, allowing there to be space for thought and not necessarily a rushed conversation or a yes or no, but setting, asking those open-ended questions also helps to create the conditions that will make the conversation successful. Also, limiting distractions, but planning ahead so that you have things like books or videos on cue to help them understand the message. And then, of course, reminding them that you're there for them, that you will keep them safe as you can, and that you love them, you care for them, and that you're having this conversation out of love and necessity, not out of anything that's punitive or that there will be consequences if they don't want to talk.
And you've mentioned books, videos. I just want everyone to know that's one of my questions. I've noted that because I know our audience wants to like exactly, what can I go and find? So we're going to come back to that at the end of the call. So as adults who are preparing to have these conversations with children, you mentioned some of the conditions. What are some other ways, I guess, that we can prepare ourselves? So I want to talk about two things. How we can prepare ourselves for these conversations. And then I'm going to talk about how we can support kids who might be experiencing racism. So let's talk with like how we might prepare ourselves to have conversations with kids about issues of race and racism.
Sure. I think the top two things I would suggest are to know yourself. Identify your own morals and beliefs and values. Identify your own biases. Understand that everyone grows up differently. We have different experiences. We have different influences. So understand, take those into account. And then the second thing is to educate yourself. So just like you're joining this meeting today, take some time to learn about history. Take some time to learn about race and racism and what it is. Not only drawing from your own experiences, but draw from experts and the experiences of others. And when we explain race to children, and when we talk with children about racism and what it is, it's very important that we make it relatable. We want to make sure that it's on their level. We're meeting them where they are. And so I can offer a few suggestions. So for kids, especially your age 5 to 11, a great way to explain racism is to explain fairness versus unfairness. We know that children understand what's fair and what's not. That's the first thing they may say when they aren't able to get that ice cream, or they see another child with something and they can't have it. Oh, that's not fair. So they understand the concept of fair. So that's a great way to explain racism and the structure and how for some people, things are fair, and for others, things are not fair. For children that are brown or that are Black, things tend to be unfair, and the opposite would apply for children who are white. When explaining race, race is basically a construct, and it's based off of how you look and where you're from. So it's helpful to talk about various countries, but also making sure that while we are appreciating people that look different from us, that we are not only explaining the differences, but also explaining the similarities. And so when we talk about race, we can say some children may look like this. Some children may have brown skin and dark hair, where others may have tan skin and dark hair. So it's really showing pictures and talking about the way people look, because that's what race is based off of. It's based on, it's a construct based basically on the appearance of someone. When talking to older children, you can talk about systemic racism and unfairness in the US, and use examples that they may have in school. So it may be that everyone has to wear a belt, but maybe not all kids have a belt. So should those that don't have a belt be punished or penalized? Using examples that are relevant to them, that they may see every day, will help them understand racism and race in general, and also continuing to teach respect and kindness, and that everyone deserves respect, everyone deserves kindness, regardless of how they look or how they present themselves, is also really important. When talking about racism, the other thing that I would point out is to use facts. Don't be afraid to say their names. George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland. You know, this helps to explain why we're having the conversation and why they may see this in social media so much. If you can use if you have your video on, you can raise your hand or just wave, or you can use the raise hand function in the box. But how many people have heard of the name Tamir Rice? You could just quickly raise your hand. Okay. So I'm seeing about half. So Tamir Rice was a 12-year-old that was shot by the police. So again, it's about educating yourself and raising awareness. And when talking to children about racism, you can use the example, well, Tamir Rice was a young Black boy, 12 years old, around your age, that was shot and killed by a policeman. You're giving facts. This is why we now start to see Black Lives Matter. We start to hear more about race and injustice. You can use those facts to help them understand what they're seeing and why it's important that we talk about this. The other thing that I would like to offer is, when talking about racism, especially with younger kids, use stories and ask open-ended questions. Can everybody be a princess? Does it matter what the color of their skin is? Can everybody be a superhero? Does it matter what their abilities are? Does it matter what the color of their skin is? Does it matter how old they are? Using those type of examples will help kids to understand in their own kind of language or in their own experience, or start to at least get a grasp of the concept. And then when we talk about things like explaining protest and explaining why there's so much, why I hear so much about police and police, the way some police treat Black people. Again, educating yourself so that you can explain it on a level where they can understand. You can meet them at their level and not dismiss their question or not ignore the question. It's often easier to be dismissive or just to kind of move on because you don't know how to answer that question. But I can offer a couple of suggestions. When talking about police and why police may be mean to Black people, or why are Black men being shot, talking about people in power and the misuse of power is a good way to start that conversation. You can use examples such as teachers. You know, some teachers are mean, but are all your teachers mean? Well, of course not. So you can talk about how some teachers may be mean to the entire class. Sometimes it's one child that misbehaves, but the entire class gets the consequence, right? Or sometimes it's a teacher, it's a child that misbehaves and they're constantly being yelled at by that teacher. And you can explain that that doesn't mean that all teachers are bad, and that certainly doesn't mean that all teachers are mean. It's just this is an example of how someone in power can misuse that power if they're not educated, if they're fearful, and if they don't know how to resolve certain situations without resorting to being angry, yelling, being punitive, or sending someone out of the classroom. The other example you can use with younger children is friends. So you may have other students in your classroom that are mean, but that doesn't mean all of your friends or all of the students in the classroom are mean. So it's helping to separate what they may be hearing and seeing. And so helping them not to generalize, but to separate and to recognize that some people are a certain way or may conduct themselves a certain way. And it's not your fault, but what we can start to do is recognize it, and in some instances stand up or call it out. And so before we move on, I want to talk about protest. So I've had questions about, well, how do I explain protest to children? I usually use an example of bullying when it comes to younger children, saying that, or helping them understand that, or using an example of when you are in a situation and you may see your friend Chris bullying your friend David, or being mean to your friend David. And as your parent or as your teacher, I encourage you to let somebody know, let an adult know, or stand up and say, no, that's wrong, or stop being mean. When we stand up for other people, when we voice when somebody's being treated wrong, that's an example of what the gist of a protest is. So it's a lot of people standing up so that the things that are done wrong can be right. And so we can come together and people march and people sing songs and they talk out loud. They have signs to show that there's something that's going wrong and it needs to be fixed. When talking to older children, teenagers, adolescents, I often use when they get together for pep rallies. So the intention of a pep rally is to boost everybody's morale, have a good time, but everybody's coming together for one purpose and you're cheering for one team. So it's, again, when you talk about a protest, it's people coming together for a reason, for intention, and they are speaking out so that something can be better for the lives of others. And in the most recent case, it's Black lives that we're protesting and advocating for. So the equal treatment or better treatment of Black people. And so using those examples can kind of help children grasp that understanding of police brutality, of protest, and of racism.
And what I love about your examples are, I mean, they just are so aligned. I know this is on purpose with with our philosophy of youth development, that we are empowering young people. And I think, what is so fantastic about our field is that, we appreciate young people's understanding of situations, that we understand that young people can discern when situations are fair or unfair. And then, our responsibility is to give them the tools to help make that different, for themselves, for the greater society. I also think you really raise an important point, that let's not assume that kids are unaware of George Floyd, or particularly our young people. If they're on TikTok, if they're on Instagram, they are seeing this, they know this. And again, we want to empower them to be able to understand this, to be able to do something about it, to take action. I wonder,
before you go on, Gina, I want to recognize one of the comments. Somebody commented about using the cafeteria as another example, protesting against certain foods or protesting, and that's a wonderful way to explain protest to children, using things like toys or food or crayons even. Using some students getting broken crayons versus students getting new crayons. They're incredible examples and a lot of knowledge. So please keep sharing those ideas. I'm learning as well.
I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege to say that these examples might work with adults as well as children. So yes. So I'm thinking about the young people in our programs who might have actually experienced, and I think to your point about giving examples and then creating space for young people to share their stories of racism. So I'm thinking about adults who are working with young people who are experiencing racism on a daily basis. Where can we offer support there? So to help them deal with it, but then also help them to empower them to do something about it.
Absolutely. So one rule of thumb is to, when you see it, call it out. When you see rude and racist language being used or behaviors, mistreatment, don't wait to call it out or pull the child aside. Call it out then and there among the people that are seeing it or witnessing it. because those that are observed are also taking away lessons from the response and from that situation. So don't be afraid to say, stop. We do not do that. That's not kind. And give them reasons that's not true or that's not being honest. Help them understand what the behavior is or what the words that they use, why they're not acceptable, and be consistent about it, and make sure that you're doing that for everyone, not just pinpointing one or two students, but being conscious about all of the students that may be having saying different things or using language that's inappropriate. Also, listen to understand and not respond. It's really crucial that we listen to the question being asked, because sometimes we can go into this complex answer and try to explain it away, or try to help, try to diminish or demean or belittle what the situation is. And for that child, that meant something great to them. So if a child is saying such and such called me a name, don't be dismissive. That's a great time to explain, well, what was happening during that time? And let's go talk to this person and figure out why they called you that name and where does that come from? Also asking the child, how does that make you feel? And how do you think you can respond? If you were a superhero, how would you respond to that comment when it was made to you? So encouraging them to speak up for themselves and giving them the tools to do so. Also, don't assume, because you may know their socioeconomic status, what they may or may not have and what they may or might not have access to. So it's really important that when we are supporting kids and when they're experiencing racism, they're experiencing discrimination, that they may or may not have someone else to go talk to about that. So you might be that point person. Maybe they don't feel comfortable talking to their teacher or their parents about it. You will be the person that is their confidant. So it's really important that you listen and that you take that very seriously and help them to work through that. And then also being aware of the environment. So when we talk about racism, it's often thought of as an individual experience, but we don't want to forget that it is an experience that a group of people have. So there may be a group of students that you're working with, or a group of kids that may have heard the comments, or that may have been experiencing racism, or that may feel like there is a teacher or there is someone in their lives who's treating them different because of the way they look. It's important to, again, listen and ask questions, ask open-ended questions so that you can understand where it's coming from before you respond. And then the other suggest is to have conversations with the students, have safe space circles, or times where you can, pose a question and allow them to speak out, allow them to talk about their experiences, all of the students to talk about their experiences, even the ones that may be saying the unkind things or doing the unkind behaviors, the bully or the bullied. Allow them both, allow them all to sit in a space and share, because you can learn from them. And the more that you understand their perspective, the better that we can be there to support them, because we are certainly living in a different day and age right now with technology. Bullying goes beyond the 3:30 bell at the end of the day. And so it can go beyond the 6:30 time when parents pick them up. And so again, just being open and understanding that that this does exist, and that sometimes an ally is what's needed in order to validate their feelings, validate their experiences, and then work with them to figure out what the next step is going to be.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have like a page of notes here for everything you said. I'll just echo one thing. I think while we're not making assumptions, don't make and I would say this to all of the professionals on this call, let's not make assumptions that your kids know that your program is a safe space to call these things out, right? I think it's an opportunity for us as the adults and the professionals in the room to be very explicit that, that is the program we are operating now, or maybe always have, or something like that. I think, because I think that it's a conversation around power, right? That children might not understand that they are empowered to speak up for themselves, to speak up on behalf of. So I think about, again, to our peers on this call. I would say I see a lot of young faces on the call too. I mean, I think don't assume that the administration of your program shares this. I mean, I think, and maybe we can come back to that on the call about how to, as professionals, to feel empowered, raising this as an important issue to your supervisors, to your program, that you want to be a program that operates in this way. So we're going to come back to that when we kind of go to some resources and suggestions. But I want to go over to Heidi, because I have seen like a million questions and some great suggestions coming up on the chat as well. So just a reminder to everyone, we're recording this call. We'll capture the chat conversations, and we'll be sharing out some of these great ideas and resources you all are sharing. But Heidi, what are a couple of top questions we see coming up?
So, wow. So as questions are coming in, I've been writing them down, and I think for the most part, you've been answering them. It's like, it's just coming back through to you. And Gina, this is something you and I have talked about, but somebody earlier on said that the person tried to have some conversations about this in a program, and somebody, and I think it was an administrator, told her that they don't get political in their program. So can we come up with some suggestions on how we talk about this as not a political issue, but an education and a public health issue? Human, justice issue, rather than
Absolutely.
politics, without angering your administration, because that's not good either.
Yes, absolutely. So that's a great question, and something that I'm sure is not just happening to one person, right? I'm sure that there's a lot of pushback when you go to advocate for almost anything. There's someone or there's some ones who are going to push back and take this in a way that is not intended to be taken, right? And so you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned human rights, when you talked about public health. One thing is to definitely start with facts. Facts are oftentimes come from research. You can use literary research, published research. We always talk about evidence-based programming and practices. Use evidence, start with the evidence to make your case. And so when you're talking about or trying to advocate for something in your program or in your district, look at the data that is within your district and start to pull from that to tell the story. So for example, looking at families who don't have access to fresh food or may not have access to food at all. A family doesn't have access to food is not a political issue. Yes, there are policies and things that will help to improve access, but the basic fact is that everyone needs nourishment, and some families or some people don't have access to food. The same thing when it comes to race discrimination. There are students in our program, or there are teachers in our program who are treated differently because of the way that they look. It's not because they're not as smart. It's not because they don't show up on time. It's not because they're not as professional. It's not because they don't achieve or that they don't have the potential to achieve, but there are certain barriers that are holding them back to be at their best. And so starting to point some of those barriers out, or starting to point some of those points out by using data, understanding that if you look at the Black and brown kids in our program, they may or may not be doing XYZ, or they may or may not experience XYZ, or the teachers in this program. I noticed that the Black and brown teachers in this program don't have as many computers in their room, or they don't have as many books in their room. And these are, again, are just examples, but setting the picture, setting the stage with data, and then drawing on that to come up with or offer some valid solutions. And again, your solutions are not going to be delineated by a certain party, but they may be looking at different policies that are within the school district, or looking at practices within your program that you set around and you help to write. At the time, we thought that requiring kids to have their hair cut above their ears was justified, and we thought that there was nothing wrong with that. Well, going back now, we see that David has been expelled from school, or he's not been admitted into this program for 2 weeks just because his hair is slightly longer than what we required. Is that really impacting his learning? This teacher, I don't know, we require red shirts. This teacher doesn't wear a red shirt. Maybe she wears a blue shirt or a green shirt. Is that impacting the way that she's teaching? Is that impacting the way that she's able to support the kids that are in need? So helping to paint the picture and understand that it's a human thing, and that we should have compassion and respect one another enough so that collectively we can help these kids, these young people, achieve and be their best. And so when you take the data, you take the story, you take some solutions you've thought about, bring it back to that shared goal of supporting students and their families. So how does this impact how we support those students? How does this impact how we support families? And when you can't get through one person, talk to someone else. Sometimes there's strength in numbers, and sometimes it's just finding that right person that has just enough power to start to make waves. And if you continue to say things over and over again, they will be, eventually people will listen. Sometimes it's certainly not going to happen overnight. Sometimes it takes days, weeks, months, a couple of years, but be persistent and be consistent. And sometimes it's even bringing in the folks that did the research, bringing in experts, looking for the people that influence that decision maker that's pushing back, looking for those individuals that influence that person, looking to see who their mentors are. So maybe going above and coming at it in a different direction will help help people to understand why it's important and why you're bringing that concern up. And then I also wanted to point out too that it's really important that we understand, even when we are working with youth, that our message that we give them in within our organization, in the after school program, in the classroom, may be the exact opposite of what they see and hear at home. And so recognizing that you don't have the power to change their home life, but you do have the power to change their experience and their perspective while they're in your care. And so exposing them to positive components of diversity, and even with your leaders, using kids' voices to, if that's what it takes to tug at their heart, using those kids, using the children, allowing them to speak out, allowing them to write letters, to write messages, to paint pictures, to color, whatever age appropriate activities they can do to help advocate for that change, but don't give up.
I mean, so many wonderful ideas. I think these experiences, while I know they are so frustrating, are fabulous moments of leadership opportunity for those of us on this call. I think and I think the point to make it solution oriented is so important. What might you as a professional Might you offer to, to lead a discussion, lead a book club, share some articles? I mean, I think, how can you begin to educate up? The other thing I'll add is, along with this just being a human rights issue, social justice issue, how we approach these issues is just a core foundation of our work as professionals. So I just want to say to everyone on the call, and I think this could be powerful, possibly if you're talking to your administrators, we have a code of ethics as a profession. The code of ethics covers 4 areas: our obligation to children in our program, our obligations to their families, our obligations to our colleagues, and our obligations to our community. The code of ethics is on our website. Maybe Megan or somebody can put it in the chat box. I cannot think of any one of those 4 categories that would not be impacted by talking about this issue and taking action on this issue. So I say that to you all as professionals, to use that code of ethics for our profession as a tool in your toolbox to move these conversations forward. So I'm mindful of our time. I think we could talk all day. And Heidi tells me she has one more question. I want to go back to you, Dr. Freeney, for some of those resources. And if there's time, we'll come back to Heidi for the question, if that sounds good to everyone. What are some resources you recommend for people who are really committed to getting started in this work or continuing?
Absolutely. There's an organization called Teaching Tolerance. And I really like this organization because they have a way of explaining concepts and then also giving you tangible ways to apply them within your program and in the classroom. For example, when in history class, when children are being taught about racism or about, not racism, but history and slavery, looking at how that message is set up. So instead of diving right into Black people were slaves and white people were slave owners, start back a little earlier and talk about Black people as being queens and kings, Black people having wealth, having power. Set that story up so that when you talk about slavery and you talk about white people being slave owners and Black people being sold just for their labor and their body, that the Black children in your classroom can still walk out with their heads held high. They're not going to be slumped over and feeling belittled or inferior because of the message or the story that was just told. Also talk about how white people were advocates and allies, and not all white people were slave owners. Not all white people took advantage of the slave during that time. They stood with and they fought alongside, and just be mindful of how you're telling the story. And Teaching Tolerance and some of the other resources that I'm going to provide will help you do that. Some of these other resources that, and I'll put some either in the chat or I'll send them to Gina and she can send them out. They help you to understand your own bias, your own stereotypes, and your own awareness of how you communicate when you're talking to kids. So one of the things that I think a lot of us do that we're really not conscious about is that we may put adjectives on certain individuals and not others. So we may say, how was class today? Or how was math class today? Which is a better way than saying, well, how was that, how did that Black teacher treat you today? Or how did the white teacher treat you today? So instead of using racial adjectives, start to use other facts. So the science teacher, how was your science class? How did the science teacher, I know you and the science teacher weren't getting along. How did you all get along today? So again, being mindful of those types of communication, and then the nonverbal. We know that most of communication is nonverbal. So if your body language or your tone, if you sound angry when you talk about it, if you sound frustrated, or if it sounds like it's an effort, then you might want to rethink how you're having the conversation and maybe have it at another time. And some of the resources that I have here will also help you to be mindful of those. So I have a whole list of can
Yeah,
share?
why don't you send them to us, and there have been some amazing ones. I can't even keep up with all the ones being posted in the chat box, but we'll collect all of those. And
Okay.
guys, when we send out the link with the recording, we'll put that list of resources together.
And I
Yeah.
wanted to also say, well, one resource is to learn about yourself is taking Harvard University's implicit bias test. And that's really eye-opening. There's a lot of different isms. I call them isms: racism, ableism, sexism. There's a lot of different tests that you can take just to see where your bias lies. And so being open to learning about yourself and understanding how that plays out in your interactions with students, parents, families, with other staff, because certainly everyone has some level of implicit bias, regardless of what it may be, but it does come out in how we treat others. And we can see that within the discipline system. We see that Black kids are often criminalized more for the same conduct issues that white kids are. And so again, implicit bias being one of those factors, because oftentimes those disciplinary actions are discretionary, right? Not mandated. Another thing is the list of books that I'm gonna share are both for yourself, and then there's some children's books that can also be shared that you can have in the classroom or in your program that celebrate diversity and that allow kids, regardless of what they look like, what their size might be, what their abilities might be, what their skin color may be, it allows them to see themselves. And so even though your leader may not want to make change, you can start making that change just by how you, by the activities that you implement, by the videos that you introduce, and by what you have in the classroom or what you have on the walls in your organization. And one of the things that I often say when I start this conversation is to keep in mind that these conversations about race are different for Black families than they are non-Black families. Non-Black parents can often use these tips and suggestions to explain things and to talk about things with their child, or with their students. But Black parents have a very, very different conversation, and it's often based on wanting to maintain the safety of their child while they're in public.
Yeah. So we will look forward to getting all of those resources, combining everything and sharing them. I do want to, again, say to our audience, I think a super important point among many that you made is really how we all need to think about systems. So of course, broader systems of discipline within school systems where some of us might operate, but also systems at the program level, and really encourage, my peers on this call to look at the systems within your program itself, because all the things we're talking about are wonderful and they are empowering, and we are committed to doing everything we can to help young people grow up in systems that allow them to live, lives that are full of meaning and fully equitable. But we have to understand that if we don't address issues at the system level, and often that starts with our program rules and responsibilities. So do they look as anti-racist? So I wonder if there's anything you want to say about that, because I think sometimes we unintentionally put the responsibility for this on the individual, and without addressing what needs to happen at the system level. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. And structural racism is really what feeds into what our programs look like, how we function as individuals, as educators, as advocates. And so when you talk about policies and practices that are embedded, that are often developed for a certain group to thrive, you're really talking about structural racism, and you're talking about the foundation from which a program is built. And so Gina, you bring up a very critical point, in that if we want to see systemic change, we have to go back to the foundation. We have to look at those policies and those practices. And so one of the ways that you can support children of color, and that you can change the trajectory for those that are passing through your future, is to review those policies and practices from an equitable lens. Ask questions such as, does this policy or practice allow one group to thrive more than it does the other? Does this policy affect one group more than it does the other? And how will it affect that group? For example, and this is from the pandemic that I said I wasn't going to mention because everybody talks about it. But one example that I can think of that comes to my head is virtual learning. And so the policy is that all schools must be open, and you can be open, but you have to either implement virtual learning or in person. And so, of course, virtual learning, some schools are opting for virtual learning. The policy may be that for you to be counted as present, you have to be online. I have to see you online. I need to see your face, and you need to be engaged in the class. Is that an equitable policy? Is that something that all students will be able to accomplish? If not, then you're going to have a lot of absenteeism. You're going to have some learning loss there. So and that's just an example, but asking those types of questions will help to kind of dismantle and pick apart what and bring to light some of the issues. Again, discipline systems that or policies that you may have, zero tolerance policies. I encourage you to go back through and think about the zero tolerance policies. Just because children are from different walks of life, they have different experiences, they handle their emotions in different ways. So a child that may be shut down, that may not be participating in your class or in the program, that just may be isolating themselves. In some programs' eyes, that child is being disruptive. So they're put out of the program or they're put out of the classroom. Well, if you look at that from a trauma lens or from an equity lens, then that's the way that child has been able to keep themselves safe. Maybe they're dealing with something that they just can't right now focus on the math that you're teaching or the lesson that you're teaching at the time. They need to take some time to calm themselves, to ground themselves, and they're doing that in a way that seems dismissive to you. But if they're not disrupting the classroom, if they're not hitting or doing anything to put anybody else's safety in danger, is the policy of putting them out of the program or putting them out of the class really helpful? And is that meeting the mission of our organization? So asking questions like that and looking at the policies and the practices on a program level will certainly help to build, dismantle the structure of racism and discrimination that has been built, and will eventually start to affect the way classes are taught, programs are run, and may also increase the tools and resources that you have at hand.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of a really empowering experience, just particularly those you working with older, and I'm going to say like maybe 12 and up, young people, to get their thoughts on some of the policies.
Absolutely.
And because I think that could really open up a conversation about, wait, why
Absolutely.
do we have this policy?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what they think it might, could be instead, or something like that. Cause I think, exactly. So, oh my gosh, this has been without a doubt the best hour of, I don't know, my year, but such a great conversation. So we are almost out of time. I think what we're going to do, what we have done in the past, and I just want you to know, Dr. Freeney, the wonderful comments. I know you've just been giving us so much information. I've been keeping my eye on some of the comments. The best hour of my Quarantine Learning Academy. Okay, love both of those. Love the best hour. Love that you're calling Quarantine Learning Academy. Thank you, whoever posted that. All right, Heidi's raising her hand.
Yeah, is this like, yeah, because I just want to acknowledge, and Deborah Rogers J just said too, that because my job is watching the chat box and reading, and feel an obligation to make sure that people are stating facts or they get additional information based on some misconceptions that they are posting. It has just been so great to watch the community post and maybe correct people with information in a different way of thinking, in a way that is, I would say, part of a community-based feedback, right? So it's just been really great to see people sharing resources, adding a different perspective. And I just want to say thank you to not only you, Dr. Feeney and Jenna, for finding you and bringing you into our lives, but for everybody on the call, because it's just a great community feeling and seeing everybody interacting like this.
Yeah, I'll echo that. The thanks to obviously Dr. Freeney. Again, everyone, we're going to be sharing the recording. We'll be sharing Dr. Freeney's list of resources as well as the resources you have shared. Thank you for your commitment to this as a professional. Dr. Freeney, we need people like you, not only doing this work, but being generous with your time and sharing it with us. So thank you for that. Big thank you to those of you on the call who made time for this, fully engaged and fully committed to wherever you are in this journey, to doing something about this work, because that's what it's going to take. So again, I'm going to leave the line open because I see some people that are still maybe posing questions or adding resources. I think, Megan, let's leave it open until about 1:05. If people want to add some other links. Again, guys, we'll pull them all down, so don't feel like you have to go scroll through them and cut and paste them. But thank you all. Thanks for giving us part of your day. And Dr. Freeney, we will look forward to talking to you again. I have a feeling this may be not our only conversation, because I think
Absolutely.
we're all committed to keeping this work.
It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you
and
all.
just I want to leave you with, take care of yourself. Self-care is a priority. Self-care is not selfish. So take care of yourself and remain hopeful. And thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you all. Thanks, everyone.